Hey there, everybody. This is Kenny
And Kenny squared.
with the sports on the Positive Tip Podcast. We are so glad that you're able to join us and watch us and listen in as we combine our love of sports with our love of God. I probably should have said that the other way around, right? Our love of God with the love of sports. And we just talk about some positive things. So, Kenny, so much going on, right? We've got a game 7 tonight. The Tampa Bay Rays are in the World Series.
I shouldn't
Surprised
cheer
about
too
that?
much.
Well, obviously, you wanted your Yanks to win, but are you surprised that they're there? What were some of your thoughts on the American League Championship Series?
Honestly, I was a little worried, especially after Carlos Correa's walk-off a couple days ago.
Yeah,
Especially, I think I read it was like one of the first times or like the fourth time or something like that that team started with a leadoff home run and then ended up with a walk-off. I thought the Astros were going to try to prove themselves, like, hey, we deserve to be here. We're a good team and everything like that. But the Rays are a really good team. Charlie Morton is probably the most clutch pitcher right now. He's Madison Bumgarner from 5 years ago. I read that he's had he's made 3 Game 7 starts, and he has an ERA of under 1. He's only the second pitcher to have 2 5+ shutout innings in a Game 7. And it's ironic because, like, the Rays are all about the homegrown talent. And the one guy that they've actually went out to get as a free agent is the guy that really pulled through for them. I guess I'm not that surprised. I think I had said the Rays in 6.
yeah,
But um, I thought after losing Game 6, I thought that it didn't look good for them. But I'm glad this guy, Randy Arozarena, is like lighting up a storm still. He was killing the Yankees, killing the
yeah,
Astros. We'll see what he does in the World Series.
yeah. Daniel Murphy from 2015. He looks like even better. I
Yeah.
agree with everything you said. The Rays are a very, very interesting team. And I'm never glad when a team loses, but the Astros, I think you and I texted about that this morning. That would have been a little bit of an embarrassment for baseball if a sub 500 team, even though they are the Astros, and still the core of their players still there. So what are your thoughts on tonight? Game 7, Braves,
Um,
Dodgers. It's been both these series have been great.
yeah. I had just read that both of these series going 7 games is the first time that that's happened since 2004.
Oh wow, okay, I didn't
Which we
realize
won't
that.
talk about that, but
Oh, okay, yeah,
um,
2004. It just dawned on me. Okay.
but it has been really good. I don't know. It's really hard for me to pick on this one. I had said the Dodgers from the beginning, so I think I'm going to stick with them. This series has been very back and forth. It's been a very tight one. At this point, I don't really care who wins because you look at the 3 teams remaining as of right now. All 3 have had very long World Series droughts. Rays have never won. The Dodgers 88, the Braves 95.
Mm,
So it's been a while since any of these franchises, if they've ever won a World Series, have. So I think that's going to be very exciting. It's going to be
mm.
good for a long, loyal fan that's been there from the last 20, 25 years to celebrate their championship. So I'm
Yeah,
going to go with the Dodgers. I think they have more star power, but I wouldn't be surprised either way.
yeah, yeah. I'm kind of with you. I one of the guys that I work with now is a huge Braves fan. Lives down in Hickory, North Carolina, and he's just a huge Braves fan. And so, in a way, I'm rooting for them because of him. But I think the Dodgers is just a better team. The Braves have just gotten this phenomenal pitching through this series, but again, there was a couple of instances I thought of over managing. Although
Yeah.
it worked out okay for the Rays. Yesterday, or and as well as the Astros, I thought Lance McCullers was doing pretty well, even though he had given up a few runs. So all right, so we'll see. I guess we'll be able to talk some World Series next week. All right, so here's a question I have for you. It's been now since late July that sports came back. What's been the impact, in your opinion? Has sports been able to get people away from all of the stuff that's going on in the world? What's been the impact, do you think?
Um, I don't know. For me, it's a little hard to tell because I feel like to some extent, sports is kind of given a little bit of normalcy. But even with like the whole COVID thing, like the NFL, I feel like is like holding their breath if they can get through the season. Baseball for a little while, it looked like it was uncertain. Um, and then also like I think of the NBA with when Jacob Blake was shot and all the teams that boycotted then, and then that kind of bled over to the other sports a little bit.
Yeah.
I feel like there's still that sense that like it's still there. But like, and I say this a lot too, sports kind of gives people a little bit of a distraction from what's going on. But I feel like also sports is kind of more around this time has come alongside some of the stuff. Like there's been a lot of arenas, like everyone's encouraging people to vote. But a
Yeah.
lot of the sports teams have really said like, hey, you can use like Madison Square Garden, or I believe here in Cleveland, they're using Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse
Hmm.
as one of the polling places. So it's provided a little bit, but I think it's different from like say 9/11 when I think of like Mike Piazza's giant dramatic home run, or um, the Yankees and their run when George Bush threw out the first pitch at Yankee
Yeah.
Stadium.
Yeah.
Like it's a little different, but I think it's still a good distraction because there's a lot of craziness out there.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. I think I'll add, I'll just say for me, I think it's been not only a distraction, but I think it's put sports in perspective for me. I think, since you and I have had families, and I think we've had sports in perspective, Sundays definitely is not like it used to be where, watching football all day, like you were out yesterday and today. And that's great, right? That comes first. It's not like you're saying, I can't go because there's a game coming on. You know what I mean? So I
Yeah,
think, but even more so now, I think it's put it in perspective. For me, it's been a distraction because with my new work schedule and having that extra time of not having to commute to go home, so I have that time in the evening where I've watched a ton of movies, and I haven't watched really many movies in the last couple of weeks. I've been into these games as long as I can stay up. So I think it does put it in perspective. Um,
yeah,
yeah, so shifting gears. One more thing. The bubble really works. I mean, no hockey players, no NBA players. And I think I saw today that it's been 47 or 48 straight days that there's been no infection for baseball players.
yeah. Um, and I've already seen that the NFL is considering doing a bubble for their playoffs. It really has worked.
They may
Like,
have to. I
yeah,
mean, it's going to be interesting as we get closer to the Super Bowl and everything like that. I mean, it's not just the game itself. You think about that week leading up to the Super Bowl and how people in cramped quarters, if they're in New Orleans, or I don't remember where the game is at this year, but I'm just thinking about the cities it's been in the past. You're
yeah,
you're partying, the week of, people are like in close places. So it'll be interesting to see what the NFL does, with that. But the whole bubble thing, definitely works, and it's good to see that, the now it'll be next week this time almost, right? It'll be three sports that'll have gotten through, at least the remainders of their season plus postseason. Here's the other
yeah,
last thing. I, I think that sports is realizing this more than ever. I read an article in the news this morning with Bill Madden, and he was saying how much money some of these sports teams have lost, even though they came back.
yeah,
And so how are they going to sign free agents and stuff like that? Because like the Yankees, they're estimating would have probably lost $200 million. That's no chump
yeah,
change even to the Yankees. And you start to think about, how do they recover? So it makes me feel good. They need the fans. They need us. Sports really
yeah.
need us. They need the fans, and it'll be interesting to see, how we handle things going forward.
Yeah, and it's gonna be interesting because like the NFL, they're doing like limited fans. Like I think for the last week's Cleveland Colts game, they had like a few thousand. The NLCS has had a small handful, along with the
Yeah,
World Series will have a few.
Yeah.
So I think especially like the no fans might be a thing of the past a little bit, but I
Yeah.
guess we're gonna see because also like numbers still aren't looking great.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
Ohio's starting to spike up,
Yeah.
other places as well. So I
Yeah.
guess we'll see what happens.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk Hall of Fame baseball then. And it's been a sad year when you think about. I forgotten Al Kaline, who I don't remember that well. I remember him towards the end of his career with the Tigers, but I missed a lot of his glory days. I do remember him hitting a home run in the All-Star game in '71. Then Lou Brock, who I remember a little bit better because he played a little bit later into the '70s, late '70s. I think he retired in '79. Bob Gibson, I certainly remember. Tom Seaver, obviously, I remember. And then Joe Morgan, who was a big memory for him. So we'll stick to him for a few seconds. And so I'm gonna say this. First, Joe Morgan, the Reds really didn't become the big red machine until they made a big trade to get him. Although he was on the '72 team that lost the World Series that year, they just became a different team when they got him. It was just something about him, but he's a 5-2 player. There's a lot of 5-2 players now. I really don't. I don't like to compare eras and everything. It's just a different era in baseball. I think we're seeing all or nothing. Sometimes we're seeing a lot of strikeouts and a lot of home runs, but it's different.
Yep.
And I still enjoy watching. So, but
Mm-hmm.
when I think about Joe
Definitely.
Morgan being a 5-2 player, I want to see what your reaction is. And you know what player he reminded me of, or what modern player reminds me of him? You know who I'm gonna say?
I would guess Mike Trout, but I don't know.
Well, no, Mike Trout. Mike Trout's a better player than Joe Morgan, but because of his size, think size in second base. Who do you think I'm going to say?
DJ LeMahieu?
That's a good one. LeMahieu might actually be. He has to do it for longer, but he might actually have been a better player than Morgan too. I'm thinking Jose Altuve.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Because I mean, Morgan wasn't much bigger than Altuve, and Altuve's a 5-2 player. Now, listen, he certainly got humbled, and he certainly had his issues in the playoffs this year. But up until that point, no matter how he got it, and we know that there was some sketchy things going on. The guy, Joe Morgan, he reminded me of Joe Morgan for the type of style of play, and he was Altuve clearly the leader on that team. Morgan was
Yeah.
clearly the leader on the Reds, So anyway. So 1975 wins his first MVP. They win the World Series that year against the Red Sox. So check out these numbers. 17 homers, 94 RBIs. Again, he's a second baseman. This is not a power position. And he's about Altuve's size, a little bit bigger. 67 stolen bases.
Wow.
132 walks, and he hit 327. So those numbers, what stands out for you the most?
I'm thinking nowadays the 67 stolen bases. I would bet that there's a handful of teams, probably a handful of teams that didn't even have 67 stolen bases combined.
Yeah.
I know shorter season and all. Also the walks.
Yeah.
Like his on base percentage, was that over 400
Oh,
easily?
it was way over 400. Yeah, I want to say it was like 440 something. It was up there because he didn't play 162 games. I think he played 146 games, something like that. Yeah, I mean that's an all around. That's a winning ball player all around. Season. So you're saying the stolen bases and walk stands out. I agree. It's 76. I don't want to say what team they beat in the World Series that year, but in 76, 27 homers, 111 RBIs. Second baseman batting in the number 2 position, by the way. 60 more stolen bases, 114 walks, and he batted 320. What stands out for you there?
I think the RBIs there. And also like 27 home runs, 114 RBIs. That means that he was driving in a lot of guys. And that's kind of hard to do in the 2-hole. Like, a lot of analytics, like you look at a lot of the modern lineups, a lot of like the best hitters hit number 2. Like Judge usually hits second for the Yankees. Trout sometimes will hit second for the Angels.
Yeah.
Francisco Lindor a lot of times will bat second. But still, that's a lot of runs to drive in. Which means that's good.
Yeah. Now listen, the guy who led off of those red teams was Pete Rose. So he also was always on base. So, but I mean, the guy was a great player those 2 years it was. I mean, the rest of his career was pretty consistent. These stood out. I mean, he generally batted around 300. I think he wound up as a 280, somewhere around there hitter. But he always was close to like 80, 90 RBIs. He had just a steady, consistent career. 10-time All-Star, won 5 Gold Gloves. So that, makes it the really all-around player. Elected to the Hall of Fame, 1990. I think then, and I want to ask you about this. What did you think of his broadcasting career? Because in the mid 90s, he actually worked. Remember when you were a little kid, they had the baseball network, and
Oh yeah.
yeah, and so he got to do 3 World Series on NBC, and he did a lot of posts. He did, I think it said 4 National League Championship Series in the mid 90s. So before he got to ESPN, he, had gotten to be in some really broadcast of big games. But he was 19 years on Sunday Night Football, which I thought was amazing. Him and John Miller, what a run that they had. And I didn't realize this, Kenny. I don't know if you remember this, but I didn't realize it in 2010 when they ended their run before the 2010 season. It was because he got hired as an advisor for the Reds, and he didn't want to turn that job down, but he wanted to do both. And ESPN said, no, we can't do both. And you know what? Unfortunately, John Miller wanted to come back, but they felt like they had such good chemistry all those years that nobody else would work well with Miller. So they said, let's just start over, I didn't realize that. I thought they just wanted to change. They wanted to keep them going, but, Morgan really wanted to go back and work for the Reds. So what are some thoughts, memories from him as a broadcaster?
Well, I think that is interesting. First of all, I'll say that Sunday Night Baseball has not been the same since the two of them were on there.
Yeah.
Like I like A-Rod probably more than most Yankee fans do. Like, I don't really have that much against him. But to me, he's just kind of boring. Like, he comes up with some good stuff, but, like, he's not really that dynamic.
Right.
Matt Vasgersian, or however you pronounce his name,
right.
He seems kind of also a little like, I feel like I have heard his voice because he used to be on MLB Network, Fox.
He still does. Yeah, he does. Yeah.
Yeah. So, like, they're okay. Some of the other combinations when, like, they had Kurt Schilling and whatnot, they were okay. But, like, I remember growing up, like, I'm watching a big game, and it's, like, on Sunday night, like, it feels better. I feel like he was, like, really – not only was he, like, good in, like, breaking down the game, but it seemed like he had really good, like, rapport with the players. He seemed like he was just a really good overall broadcaster. Him and John Miller, like, they were just such a good dynamic duo. And then also when they would wouldn't they also broadcast the World Series on ESPN Radio?
Yeah, they would switch over and do radio. Yeah, they would broadcast the World Series on radio. And I'm glad you brought that up. He did 18 World Series on the radio, him and John Miller.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I think, like, when I think of, like, broadcasting duos during my time, they're probably the best. Like, Joe Buck, Tim McCarver, like, I don't have anything against them either. Yeah. But, like, I think those two are the best, John Miller, Joe Morgan.
Yeah, I would agree. The only thing I would say is that McCarver and Morgan, to me, their careers seem pretty similar. McCarver, not nearly the player. He was a very good player, but not nearly the great player that Morgan was. But he's been broadcasting for so long. I know he's not on anymore, but, I mean, how many big games did he do? I mean, he was in, like –
yeah.
He just switched networks. Whoever had – he was on CBS when they had the World, baseball. Then he went to ABC. I mean, he's been on, several networks, and he was a long time, obviously, with Joe Buck. Hey, two things I couldn't find, like, what Joe Morgan's faith was. I was interested in that because he seemed like a gentleman, He just seemed like a really good guy. But I found two interesting things. One was in 1988, the LA police were in LAX airport, and they mistook him for a drug dealer. And they actually tackled him to the ground. Now, 88, he's still relatively young. He's probably like in his 40s, I guess, at that time, maybe early 50s. And so they tackle him down to the ground, and it's a rough arrest. They arrest him, and almost immediately after they take him into custody, somebody recognizes that, hey, this is Joe Morgan. He's not the guy we're looking for. So they apologize, make a public apology and everything like that. I don't remember any of this. And but apparently Morgan is like, there's a statement I got to make here. So he sued the LA Police Department or whoever it was that was, maybe it was the airport police department. Either way, he saw the lawsuit all the way through and he won $540,000, which, you know, they found them guilty and liable, you know, for mistaken identity or whatever it was. So he became a very much an advocate of, you know, anti-police brutality and wanted to change policing laws and everything like that because of that incident that happened with him. I had never known that until I did a little research the last couple of days.
Yeah, I didn't know that either.
There's a great organization called RBI. I'm sure when I say it, you've heard of them, Reviving Baseball in the Inner City. And while he didn't start that, he was a big advocate and proponent, you know, of the RBI and bringing baseball back because he had said on a lot of occasions he was really disturbed by the lack of black ball players. And, you know, that black athletes had really, you know, after the 70s and 80s really wanted to play basketball and football even more. So, and that's kind of still the same way. I mean, there's probably a little bit more than it were the last few years, but he was a big proponent for that. But it looks like those are the two things he was very passionate about. So really interesting career. So 1 Samuel 17:49, he reminds me of David because he was this little guy who just like overcame all odds to become one of the best, has to be top 2 or 3 best second basemen of all time. And so that scripture is, you know, reaching into a shepherd's bag and taking out a stone. He hurled it with his sling and hit the Philistine in the forehead. The stone sank in, and Goliath stumbled and fell face down to the ground. And what's really interesting to me is that why I thought of that is because the Reds almost seemed like Goliath back then. It was hard to beat them for that 5, 6, 7 year period. You know, when they had Tony Perez, Johnny Bench, you know, all these Hall of Famers, you know, on the team. But clearly the leader on that team was Joe Morgan, who to me was like David. You know what I mean? He was like the underdog, but they certainly wasn't the underdog in those times, you know. So yeah. So I want to hear about LeBron James from your point of view. I'll talk about Bob Gibson real quick because I want to see your face as I say these stats. So the two things stick out for me with Bob Gibson is just two things. One is that he made, I think it's 14 All-Star games. I didn't write it down, so that might not be accurate, but he was an All-Star a lot of times. Wouldn't you, if you were a player, want to play in the All-Star game like every year?
Yeah, absolutely. Because like
it's like the All-Star game. He never wanted to go. He never did not go. But do you know why he hated the All-Star game?
Because people would hit him?
No, no, because he despised his opponents. He didn't dislike the people, but he didn't want to be teammates with people that he knew he had to go out and beat. You know what I mean? So he was a recluse. Like when, you know, he went to the All-Star games, it was like he'd be in a corner sitting down. He wouldn't socialize with any of the other players except players from the Padres. I thought that was interesting. All right, I'll read this real quick. To me, this guy is, and we could debate this maybe a little bit more next week. This guy is just one of the best postseason pitchers of all time. Played in 3 World Series, so he didn't have the layers back then, right? But in the World Series, he had 9 starts. And guess how many complete games?
9.
9 complete games, absolutely. 2 shutouts, 92 strikeouts, 7-2 record, and 1.89 ERA in the postseason.
Wow.
But get this, it gets better. The 1967 World Series, he made 3 starts, 7-game series against the Red Sox. He went 3-0 with a 1.0 ERA in those 3 starts. Wow. He practically won the World Series for them that year. It's really just amazing. I could go on and on with his stats. Game 1 in 1968, I think he still holds that record, 17 strikeouts. Shut out the Tigers, I think, I want to say 1 or 2-0 in Game 1 of that World Series. Here's what I want to ask you, though. The 1968 season was his best. I mean, he won the Cy Young and MVP that year. He won the Cy Young, I think, again the next year. But he was 22-9 with a 1.12 ERA. 289 strikeouts. He had 28 complete games that year. how the heck did he lose 9 games? Oh, and he had that loss of games 1-0 or something like that. I mean, how do you lose 9 games?
Yeah.
1.12 ERA. That's a.
I think it's like I think of Jacob deGrom a couple of years ago when he had like, what was it, like 30 starts where he gave up 3 or less runs but still lost like 10 games or something like that.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
It's just crazy. I'd love to dig into that a little bit more. But for my money, this guy was the best postseason pitcher. I don't know.
Yeah.
We could probably debate that, El Duque and a few others. But all right, let's turn it over to you. You want to talk a little bit about LeBron James and now winning another championship. So fire away.
All righty. Well, I think, first of all, I think LeBron James has proven that he's probably the most versatile player ever. Winning titles with 3 different teams. He's also won it with 3 different head coaches. And Eric Spoelstra's good. Frank Vogel's okay. Ty Lue, he's getting another shot to show what he has, but not doing it with like a guy like Phil Jackson or Greg Popovich or any of the Hall of Fame coaches, which I think that's impressive. And then you look at especially this year. I mean, obviously he has Anthony Davis, but the second player after AD, nobody's really that good. I mean, I guess Rondo, who might be a Hall of Famer, but that's still kind of pushing it. And also, and I mentioned this, I think, a couple of weeks ago, how all the different challenges his team had to overcome. He became the starting point guard for a while. Yeah. And then having to deal with the death of Kobe and the pandemic and the racial unrest. I think, and also during the racial unrest when they did the stoppage, he was one of the guys that was like, I'm ready for the season to just end. I don't want to play anymore. And then goes out and wins a championship. And this is going to be my hot take for the week here. I think if you place LeBron James right now in the Knicks, he would make them a title contender within the next 2 years.
Even at his age, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Even at his age, and even if I guess they would probably have to add another piece like a Chris Paul or somebody. And obviously it's not going to happen. He probably doesn't want to play for the Knicks anyway. Yeah. But I think if you were to put him on any team, I think he would make them instantly a title contender. Imagine him on the Suns with Devin Booker and that whole squad. It would be one of the top teams in the West automatically.
Yeah.
And I saw a lot of different videos this week, especially early on in the week, kind of debating whether LeBron is the GOAT or Jordan is the GOAT. And to me, it's really hard to compare the two because it's different eras. They both have different skill sets, and it's hard to make that judgment. But something that really stuck out to me was how so often people love to play the comparison game. And a lot of times, when it comes to our sins, we like to compare ourselves to other people. Well, I'm not that bad of a sinner. I'm not like Hitler, or I'm not I'm not in the sex trafficking ring, making children unsafe and all. Yeah. But really what we should be doing is we should be comparing ourselves to Jesus. Often in the Bible, it says that we should be comparing ourselves to Jesus, not to other people. And Jesus tells a parable where there's a religious Pharisee who is praying to God saying God, thank you. I'm not like one of the other sinners out there, that I'm not like a thief or a robber, and that I'm so awesome. And then there's a tax collector who's the worst of the worst, that's saying, God, have mercy on me because I'm a sinner. And really hey, debating whether LeBron is the greatest player of all time or Jordan is the greatest player, it's fun. It's great. I don't have a problem with it. But don't carry that off into how we compare our lives to other people. Because not only are we in different areas of our life and God has different paths for each of us, but also we can't be saying, well, I'm not sinning like that guy over there. If you sinned, you fall short of the glory of God. And we always have to make sure that we're keeping God one.
Yeah, I totally agree. You still there, Ken? I think you're back.